Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz pianist and composer Randy Ingram. He just released 2017's The Wandering, and this cat was born in Anchorage, Alaska, but he grew up in Southern California. He parlayed his high school trio experience into scholarships at the University of Southern California, and he received a bachelor's degree for jazz performance and the New England Conservatory of Music, where he received a master's degree as well. He received an ASCAP Young Jazz Composers Award and has gone on to tour Europe as a band leader many, many times and has performed throughout Europe and Japan as a sideman. He's got a lot of stories, so get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Hey, thank you for taking a minute out to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reaching out. Happy to talk.
Right on. Well, let me go ahead and kind of generically start off here and ask you, what has been going on with you lately?
What has been going on with me lately? A lot of stuff. So, this new record came out on Friday. It's called The Wandering. It's my third record as a band leader, my second record on Sunnyside Records. This one is unique, and I'm very proud of this one. As I think you know, it's a very sort of sparse record. It's just a duet with myself and Drew Gress on bass, and I feel like this really sort of documents sort of who I am as a pianist and as an artist. And so, it's great to have this music out in the world.
Well, talk to me about what's so unique about this album. It is a great album. Take me kind of into the studio and kind of let me know why you feel so good about this album.
Okay, so let me give you a little backstory. So, my first record for Sunnyside is called Skylift. It came out in 2014, and that features my quartet with the great guitarist Mike Moreno, and that record is all original compositions. And my original plan was to sort of follow that record up with another of the same band and the same idea, and part of the thought process in that quartet is really with two harmonic string instruments, you have a lot of possibility for color and harmony and sort of composed music. So as I was sort of writing new pieces in that vein and sort of thinking about that instrumentation, I realized that I was missing a side to who I am and what I do, and sort of the lineage of being a jazz pianist and having freedom in the moment to interpret and to color and to just sort of spontaneously be. That was starting to lack. I was sort of lacking that in the sort of more kind of structured compositional setting. So around the same time, I was playing a lot of duet performances and hearing a lot of duet music. This new club Mesro, which is owned by the owners of Smalls here in New York, and it sort of was set up in a way to replace the void that was left by Bradley's.
Yeah.
And really sort of a piano-based duo-centric club. At least that's how it started. And I realized that some of the things, thinking back to myself as like a 15-year-old kid, like sort of falling in love with Bill Evans records for the first time, like I wanted to get back to that side of things a little bit, As I started playing with Drew, I realized this is a great fit and this music will really work. And I feel equally challenged and supported and just feel like I can do anything playing with him. And I thought, why don't we do this for the record next? I sort of curated the repertoire that we were going to play. I wrote some new music. We used some of Drew's music and sort of curated and found a couple standards, a couple pieces by other jazz composers, things that I thought would be sort of rare and also really meaningful to me. And we went into the studio and just sort of knocked it out in one day. So, very, very much like it's a live performance.
So I kind of want to depart the present and go back into your past. You were born in Anchorage, Alaska, and you were raised in Southern California. Talk to me about your childhood and how you got so interested in jazz.
So that's a good story, actually. So I started piano lessons at 4, and I remember, much to my early teachers' chagrins, like I was never exactly interested in what was there on the page for me to play. So even at a young age, I remember thinking, man, these pieces need chords. They need more stuff on the piano. And I had figured out some basic things, at a really young age. And I stuck with classical sort of all into high school, and started playing in the jazz bands in middle school and high school, and I grew up with a really phenomenal drummer named Nate Wood, who I think you might be familiar with from the band Kneebody.
Yeah.
Donnie McCaslin's group. Yeah, so Nate was one of my best friends growing up, and Nate is a complete musical prodigy, and his parents are phenomenal musicians. So by the time I started getting more interested in playing jazz and getting sort of comfortable enough to play with people, Nate and I were playing all the time, and we had another wonderful friend who was a bass player. So we had a trio, and it just sort of clicked. It's like as soon as we started playing together and sort of hanging out, I was like, okay, this is going to work. This is what I want to do. And along the way, just sort of discovering a lot more music. And I remember very vividly just sort of being in high school early and somebody saying, hey, check out Miles's record Kind of Blue, and saying, hey, I really like the piano player on this, and then finding other Bill Evans records. And I remember a TV special, I think it was in 94, there was like a big Blue Note at Town Hall or something thing on TV, right? And seeing a lot of people for the first time, like seeing Herbie Hancock on TV for the first time, I was like, whoa, I like this, and I want to do this, And it just sort of snowballed.
Was there anybody else, any other albums that you listened to that were really seminal for you that got you into jazz?
I mean, a ton of records. I think Kind of Blue was maybe the first one. That summer, I went to the Stanford Jazz Workshop. So I got to work with Mulgrew Miller and John Clayton and a lot of people. I still was very young and very green. Wayne Shorter's record, Speak No Evil, was huge. And, I think I got... I'm not that old, but it feels like a long time ago. Those were the days where you had to buy CDs, and so there was always this very judicious, like, well, which one should I get, Chick Corea Acoustic Band was very big back then in my life, sort of coming back and revisiting that music. I sort of stayed away from it for a while, but, I've been playing with Patitucci a little bit, and that's been wonderful, and, just sort of talking to him about LA and the fusion eras, it's interesting to go back and think about some of that music. But really, Herbie Hancock, Bill Evans, the Miles records, I would say by the end of high school I had pretty similar record collection to what I have today. Lots of Keith Jarrett, records like The Real McCoy or Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. Those are just really important to me.
So you played in high school, and then you got scholarships at the University of Southern California, and then you go on to the New England Conservatory, you get a master's degree. What have you learned over your life in higher educational environments? What have they taught you about being a musician?
I guess for me, the real benefit of being in those environments was the access to the people who taught there. And, through USC, I met Alan Pasqua, who has become like a real mentor to me and really a great lifelong friend, and just such a great role model and a fantastic pianist out in LA. And Alan was very instrumental in helping me get a scholarship to the New England Conservatory. And once I was there, it was a phenomenal program. It wasn't so much academic, but all of a sudden, I'm studying with Fred Hirsch and Bob Brookmeyer and taking theory classes with George Russell and hanging out with Rand Blake. And so, these days, that old sort of traditional trajectory where young musician can bypass school and just sort of go out to the clubs and meet the masters and the important mentors for him or her, that doesn't really exist anymore, right? So I think the best way to get access to those people that are so instrumental in your development is by going to a school, because that's where you're going to find them and that's where you're going to have the most access to them. So that's really the thing that I feel is like incredibly invaluable. I mean, how many people get to say that they got to play duets with Bob Brookmeyer, two pianos or piano trombone. And that's what we did for the bulk of our lessons together.
Right on. So Along the way, you played with a lot of other people. Danilo Perez, Fred Hirsch. There's been a lot of people that you played with, even with Bob.
Well, those are my teachers.
Well, but
Fred.
I guess what I should say, I should rephrase it, is that you were actively with them in that environment of playing. What did you learn from them? What do you remember now when you get on stage that they told you?
I mean, I think just everything. Fred was really instrumental. So I sort of departed from the classical world in high school as I got more into the jazz world. And in retrospect, maybe that wasn't the best idea because, I sort of had some technical problems and had some sort of pianistic things that didn't get addressed as much through undergrad. So Fred was really instrumental in helping me physically with the piano. And, he has obviously just such a marvelous touch at the instrument and great, he's sort of really renowned for how he gets his sound out of the instrument and physically how he produces that too. So, Fred was a huge, transformative influence as far as that stuff goes for me and really, really sort of helped me. And Danilo, I didn't work with him. I studied with him my second year of grad school, so I didn't study with him my first year, but, I just think of Danilo's enthusiasm and his joy and just his openness and willingness to embrace what's happening in the moment. I'm still sort of just, I saw Wayne Sunday out in New Jersey, and the performance was just so unbelievable. And I think just having a mentor who's playing on that level and also willing to take so many chances on that level in front of people is really inspiring, really an important lesson. And that's always stayed with me, to be in the moment, when you're on stage.
So you've won awards over your career. You've been recognized for what you do with your prowess. And one of them was the ASCAP Young Jazz Composers Award. Let me ask you this. Is there an award that you won, not your favorite one, but one that has surprised you the most?
I think the one that surprised me the most and was also sort of my favorite is not necessarily an award, but, last fall I went to the MacDowell Colony in New Hampshire on a composition fellowship. And the MacDowell Colony is one of the sort of oldest and most prestigious sort of artist residencies that we have in the U.S. I first was aware of it because when I was studying with Fred, he went up there for a couple weeks and wrote what became his big 3 CD box set on nunchucks with Songs Without Words project. So he's been up there many times in his career to write a lot of music, and I sort of gave it a shot and was really surprised that I got in, because I've never thought of myself as a composer with a capital C. I don't see myself writing string quartets or extended suite for big band anytime soon. It's just sort of, or conceptualized music rather. But that was a tremendous honor, and I got a ton of work done up there. And actually, I do want to go back to the quartet with guitar format for a subsequent record. And so I wrote a bunch of music that'll surface on that record eventually up there. And again, it was just a tremendous honor because the people, the other MacDowell fellows up there are just incredibly accomplished, just brilliant people.
The other facet of you is that you were in Sweden's highest grossing film in 2013, Waltz for Monica. Talk to me about that. What was that experience like?
That experience was very fun and very surreal. So my good friend John Arabagan, who's a tremendous saxophonist, had a mutual friend. We had a mutual friend who was a casting director. The director of Waltz for Monica is a very famous Danish film director named Per Fly. And, in the typical Scandinavian aesthetic of doing everything the right way and being very attentive towards detail, they wanted real musicians as much as possible for the film instead of actors. And so I got a call out of the blue from this casting director, and they said, there's this Swedish movie about a jazz singer, and they're looking for people. And I said, so they must be making a movie about Monica Zetterlund, and you're probably calling me because they want somebody to play the role of Bill Evans, right? And so they said yes, and I went in and auditioned and got the role. I mean, Bill's always been sort of a real hero of mine, and I feel like I have a little insight on who he was as a person just based on spending so much time with George Russell and Bob Brookmeyer, and another early mentor of mine was the great drummer Joe LaBarbera out in California. So I feel like I've been around so many people that knew him pretty well. And it was just really fun. I have a couple lines in the film, not very much, but a lot of it was just sort of playing on stage and learning, transcriptions of things and sort of getting them right on the camera. It was just a really interesting experience, and sort of like a once in a lifetime thing, I think.
Absolutely.
I don't see parlaying that into much more of an acting career, but you never know.
Absolutely. Well, the one thing, too, that you've done quite a bit of is you've traveled. You've been to Europe, you've been to Japan, you've been all over the place. Mm-hmm. What does travel do for you when you bring your music to people from different cultures?
I think it's absolutely necessary as a jazz musician. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is more of a pop musician and has done a lot of touring with big bands and is sort of ready to get off the road in that context. And I said one of the differences I think is this, when we're playing jazz and we're really improvising and really creating in the moment, that the connection you have with the audience is so incredibly important. And to feel like you're going to somewhere different and really sharing yourselves with the local audience, it's a really wonderful feeling. And I think it's really vital, and I think it's really important in the development and the sort of refinement of your art, too, to be in new settings and new places to inspire you and new audiences to connect with. Really sort of one of my favorite things about being a musician is the ability to travel. Yeah, I'm excited and going, have a few dates in June in Europe with Drew. I'm taking the great drummer Mark Ferber over with me, so those will be some fun gigs.
So up to this point in your life, how do you feel about your career?
As I get a little older, I learn not to judge quite as much. It's an incredibly competitive field right now, and there are so many amazingly talented musicians. And, I really choose to look at that as a positive and as a point of inspiration instead of a point of, frustration. It's tough, as a marketplace, things seem to be dwindling somewhat, and I think jazz is always going to be dependent on some level on some sort of institutional support, which unfortunately we don't have any of in this country, and what little that there is seems to be, precariously, in a very precarious place right now. It would be nice to be in a situation where there were more touring with more established artists. What I've done as a sideman, I really love. I'm not really in control of that so much, so, I do what I can as a bandleader because I feel like that's what I have a little bit more control over. In general, I have no complaints. I think things are continuing to evolve and progress, and I choose to feel really fortunate that I have the career that I do. So
let me ask you this. Of all the shows that you've seen live, and you're a live performer, if you could get into a time machine and go back and see a jazz show, where would you go? Who would you see?
I'm lucky that I've seen most of my heroes. I guess we're going to kill two birds with one stone and see two people that I wasn't around to see live. I guess I would go back to 1958 and catch, Miles' band when Bill Evans was in it. Because I didn't get to see Bill live, I didn't get to see Miles live, and of course I didn't get to see Coltrane live either. So that would kind of kill three birds with one stone there.
Well, let me ask you a general question. You've devoted your life to it, but why do you love jazz?
I think so much of it is just, it's a very pianistic thing. It's just the colors and the sounds and the creativity that's there. And I think that kind of goes back to this record too. I feel like I get to sit down in the morning and play through a tune, and I really just get to feel like I express who I am, through playing. And I feel like it's just sort of the ultimate kind of artistic form of self-expression for me. And you know, kind of looking back on it, you know, before I played jazz and before I knew much about it, you know, my parents, we didn't listen to jazz per se growing up, but we listened to a lot of standards. You know, we listened to a lot of Sinatra records and things like that. So I really kind of knew a lot of repertoire even before I knew how to play it on the piano. And it just sort of makes sense to me, you know?
So what is one of the nicest things a fan has ever said to you about your music?
You know what? Something that happened recently, actually a couple of days ago at the release show for this record at the Jazz Gallery, a good friend of mine came and brought with him the recording engineer, Malcolm Addy. And Malcolm's like sort of a real important figure in the field of recording. I mean, he interned at Abbey Road in the 60s, you know, and did some assisting work on Beatles records. He's done a whole ton of things, you know, in all genres. And one of the things that he engineered was the last Bill Evans performance at the Vanguard in 1980. And that became that 6-CD box set that came out maybe 10 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
So he recorded that, and he was at the show, and he said, you know, your music really sort of replaces a void that you know, you sort of replace the void that Bill Evans had filled for me. So, you know, I thought that was a tremendous compliment, you know, and incredibly flattering.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is great, man.
You know, and especially for somebody that really knows the music, and since he recorded it, he's intimately aware of all the ins and outs of it, you know.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know, everyone has a version of who you are. Your family, your friends, everybody that you work with. But who do you think you are? When you wake up and face today, who are you?
Wow, that's a very hard question to answer. I don't know. You know, hopefully somebody that really cares about the world and cares about the people in his life, and you know, just wants to put good vibes out there through creativity and music and art and kindness. You know, all of those are qualities that we don't have nearly enough of in the world right now. So, you know, I hope through what I do that makes the world a better place. You know.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to wrap everything up. Randy, thank you for taking a minute out to talk to me about the new album and opening up about your world.
Of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, Southern California, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Randy for his time and his stories and all that music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.